The system was never designed for you to win. From the moment you were born, you were placed into a structure you did not design, a structure that existed long before your first breath and will likely remain long after your last. You were handed rules without being asked whether you agreed with them, told what success looks like before you had the chance to define it for yourself. You were placed on a track, encouraged to follow it, rewarded for staying inside the lines, and quietly corrected whenever you stepped outside them. Over time, the boundaries became invisible because they were repeated so often that they felt natural. The system never had to cage you, it only had to condition you. It promised security in exchange for compliance, stability in exchange for silence, and opportunity in exchange for obedience. And while you were busy trying to win, the definition of winning was carefully crafted to keep you running in circles. The uncomfortable truth is this: the system was never designed for you to rise beyond it, it was designed to keep you functioning within it. And once you begin to see that, you can never unsee it. The rules were written long before you arrived. The rules you live by were not created with your individuality in mind. They were drafted in boardrooms, institutions, and eras that prioritized order over originality. Long before you developed your own voice, expectations were already waiting for you. Go to school, get good grades, choose a safe career, work hard, retire late. These steps are presented as universal truths, yet they are simply inherited instructions. They were designed for predictability, not personal fulfillment. When a system is built before your arrival, it does not account for your uniqueness. It cannot anticipate your creativity, your different rhythm, your unconventional ambitions. Instead, it attempts to standardize you. It measures you using the same metrics it uses for millions of others. The more you conform, the more you are praised. The more you question, the more resistance you face. Over time, you learn that fitting in is safer than standing out. The rules also evolve slowly, even when the world changes rapidly. Technology advances, cultures shift, and opportunities expand, yet many institutional expectations remain rigid. This creates a disconnect between what is possible and what is permitted. You feel capable of more, but the path laid out before you feels narrow. The discomfort you feel is not failure, it is friction between individuality and institutional design. Most people never stop to ask who benefits from these rules. Systems are rarely neutral. They are structured to maintain stability and hierarchy. When you follow them without question, you help sustain them. When you question them, you threaten their balance. That is why questioning is often discouraged subtly, not violently, through social pressure, doubt, and fear of exclusion. The moment you recognize that the rules were written without your consent, you begin to reclaim power. You understand that compliance is a choice, not a destiny. And with that awareness, you can start deciding which rules deserve your loyalty and which ones deserve your resistance. The game rewards obedience, not originality. From early childhood, obedience is rewarded. In classrooms, the quiet student who follows instructions is praised, while the curious one who challenges assumptions is often labeled disruptive. Over time, this conditioning deepens. In workplaces, employees who meet expectations without questioning them are promoted. Those who challenge inefficient systems may be seen as difficult rather than innovative. Originality carries risk. It disrupts patterns. It exposes inefficiencies. It asks uncomfortable questions. Because of this, systems that prioritize stability often resist it. They prefer predictability. Obedience ensures predictability. When you act within established boundaries, you are easier to manage, easier to measure, easier to replace. The tragedy is that human progress is always dependent on those who refuse to obey blindly. Every major breakthrough in science, art, and social reform came from individuals who dared to step outside accepted norms. Yet, at an individual level, stepping outside norms can feel isolating. The system subtly teaches you that safety lies in blending in. True growth begins when you decide that approval is not the highest reward. When you value authenticity over acceptance, you begin to operate differently. The system may not immediately reward you, but you step into a different kind of power, one rooted in self-direction rather than compliance. Success is defined in a way that keeps you chasing. Success is often presented as a destination, a certain income, a certain title, a certain lifestyle. From a young age, these images are reinforced through media, culture, and comparison. You are taught that once you reach a specific milestone, fulfillment will follow. Yet the milestones keep moving. When you achieve one goal, another appears. When you buy the house, you are told to upgrade it. When you secure the job, you are encouraged to climb higher. The definition of success rarely includes peace, contentment, or freedom. Instead, it emphasizes accumulation and external validation. This ensures that you remain in pursuit rather than in satisfaction. A chasing population is a productive population. When people believe they are always one step away from fulfillment, they continue to work, consume, and compete. The system thrives on this momentum. It does not require you to feel fulfilled, it only requires you to keep striving. The danger lies in adopting a definition of success that is not your own. When your goals are borrowed from societal expectations, achieving them can feel strangely empty. You arrive at destinations that look impressive but feel hollow. The applause fades quickly and the restlessness returns. Reclaiming your definition of success is a radical act. It may mean prioritizing time over money, meaning over status, or autonomy over recognition. When you define success internally rather than externally, the chase slows. And in that stillness, you begin to see the game for what it truly is. Debt is normalized to keep you dependent. Debt has become so common that it feels inevitable. Student loans, mortgages, credit cards, they are framed as necessary steps toward adulthood and achievement. Rarely are you encouraged to question whether this dependency is by design. Debt ties your future labor to past decisions, limiting your flexibility and freedom. When you owe, you cannot easily walk away. You cannot risk unconventional paths without financial consequences. Debt anchors you to stability, even when stability feels suffocating. It reduces your tolerance for uncertainty because uncertainty threatens your ability to repay what you owe. This normalization begins early. Education is presented as an investment, and loans are framed as responsible choices. Yet the burden can shape life decisions for decades. Career choices become less about passion and more about repayment capacity. Risk-taking becomes a luxury reserved for the debt-free. Understanding this dynamic does not mean rejecting responsibility, it means becoming conscious of the leverage debt creates. When you prioritize financial literacy and independence, you reduce external control over your decisions. And with fewer chains, your choices become genuinely yours. Education trains workers, not thinkers. Education is often celebrated as the great equalizer, yet its structure reveals a different priority. Standardized curricula, timed examinations, and rigid grading systems prioritize measurable performance over deep inquiry. Students are rewarded for correct answers, not for asking better questions. Creativity is frequently confined to designated subjects, while conformity governs the rest. Memorization is valued over critical thinking. Efficiency is valued over exploration. Over time, students learn to prioritize grades rather than understanding. They study to pass, not to question. This model aligns seamlessly with workforce preparation. Employers need individuals who can follow procedures, meet deadlines, and operate within predefined roles. The education system mirrors this need. It produces capable workers who can function effectively within existing structures. True education begins when you step beyond prescribed lessons and begin teaching yourself how to think rather than what to think. When you cultivate curiosity independently, you reclaim the purpose of learning. And in doing so, you move from being a product of the system to becoming an architect of your own path. Productivity is valued more than well-being. In the modern world, your worth is often measured by how much you produce rather than how well you live. From an early age, you are praised for being busy, for staying occupied, for achieving more in less time. Rest is framed as laziness, stillness as unproductive, and slowing down as falling behind. The language of achievement dominates everyday life. Deadlines, targets, performance reviews, output metrics. Rarely does anyone ask whether you are fulfilled, mentally steady, or emotionally grounded. The system prioritizes what you can generate over how you actually feel. This constant emphasis on productivity reshapes your identity. You begin to tie your self-esteem to accomplishments. When you are productive, you feel valuable. When you rest, you feel guilty. Even moments meant for recovery become opportunities for optimization, self-improvement podcasts during commutes, side projects after work, constant multitasking. You are never simply allowed to exist, you must justify your existence through measurable output. The deeper issue is that productivity benefits structures more than individuals. Companies, institutions, and economies grow when people work longer and harder. The more you produce, the more the system expands. Yet your personal capacity is not infinite. Emotional resilience, physical energy, and mental clarity all have limits. Ignoring those limits may boost short-term output, but it erodes long-term well-being. Over time, this imbalance creates silent suffering. People push through exhaustion because stopping feels like failure. They ignore warning signs from their bodies and minds because the culture rewards endurance. Instead of asking whether the pace is sustainable, they ask how to adapt themselves to survive it. The burden shifts from fixing the structure to fixing the individual. Reclaiming your well-being requires redefining value. It means recognizing that rest is not weakness, that boundaries are not incompetence, and that your humanity is not secondary to your productivity. When you stop measuring your life solely by output, you begin to see how much of your exhaustion was never personal failure, it was structural expectation. Fear is used as motivation. Fear is one of the most powerful tools within any system because it compels action without requiring inspiration. You are warned about falling behind, about financial instability, about social rejection, about missed opportunities. The message is subtle, but constant. If you do not comply, you will suffer. If you do not perform, you will be replaced. Fear becomes the invisible force pushing you forward. Unlike purpose-driven motivation, fear-based motivation does not nourish you. It keeps you alert, anxious, and reactive. You work not because you are inspired, but because you are afraid of the consequences of not working. You choose stability over exploration because uncertainty feels dangerous. This dynamic begins early. Students fear bad grades because of future consequences. Employees fear layoffs. Citizens fear economic downturns. Fear narrows your focus to survival. When survival is your priority, questioning larger structures feels like a luxury. You concentrate on avoiding loss rather than imagining transformation. The problem with fear as a primary motivator is that it limits creativity and courage. When you operate from fear, you choose the safest path, not necessarily the most meaningful one. You suppress bold ideas because the risk feels unbearable. Innovation requires psychological safety, but fear erodes that safety. When you become aware of how fear influences your decisions, you regain a measure of control. You can begin distinguishing between realistic caution and manufactured anxiety. You can ask whether your choices are guided by vision or by avoidance. And in that awareness, fear loses some of its power over you. Competition divides people who could collaborate. Competition is presented as healthy, as the driving force behind excellence and progress. From school rankings to workplace promotions, you are constantly compared to others. You are told that only the best rise to the top, that scarcity makes achievement meaningful. While competition can sharpen skills, it can also isolate individuals who might otherwise build something stronger together. When everyone is positioned as a rival, trust weakens. Instead of sharing knowledge freely, people guard it. Instead of celebrating collective success, they measure personal advantage. The system benefits from this fragmentation because divided individuals rarely unite to challenge structural imbalances. Energy that could fuel collaboration is redirected toward outperforming peers. The narrative of scarcity reinforces this division. Limited spots, limited promotions, limited recognition, the idea that there is not enough for everyone creates urgency and rivalry. Yet in many cases, scarcity is amplified or constructed to maintain hierarchy. Collaboration, on the other hand, shifts power dynamics. When individuals combine skills and perspectives, they create possibilities greater than isolated effort. Collaboration encourages empathy and shared problem-solving. It weakens the isolating effect of competition and builds resilience through community. Recognizing when competition is productive and when it is divisive is crucial. Not all rivalry is harmful, but blind competition can prevent collective growth. When you choose collaboration intentionally, you step outside a narrative that keeps people separate and instead participate in one that multiplies potential. Media shapes what you believe is possible. The stories you consume influence the boundaries of your imagination. Through news, entertainment, and social platforms, media continuously presents models of success, beauty, wealth, and power. Over time, repetition turns these portrayals into perceived norms. You begin to internalize what is celebrated and what is ignored. When media consistently highlights extreme wealth, rapid success, or curated lifestyles, it subtly shifts your expectations. You compare your reality to polished narratives. You may feel inadequate not because you are failing, but because the standard you are measuring against is selectively constructed. Beyond personal comparison, media also frames what opportunities appear realistic. Certain career paths are glorified while others are minimized. Certain voices are amplified while others are marginalized. The constant exposure to specific narratives shapes collective belief about what is achievable and who is allowed to achieve it. This influence is powerful because it operates gradually. You are not explicitly told what to believe, you are simply shown the same patterns repeatedly. Over time, those patterns define your sense of possibility. If you never see alternatives, you may not imagine them. Becoming conscious of media's influence allows you to widen your perspective. You can diversify the voices you listen to, question the narratives you absorb, and intentionally seek stories that expand rather than limit your imagination. When you control your inputs, you begin to reclaim your sense of what is possible. Burnout is treated as a badge of honor. Exhaustion has become a symbol of dedication. Long hours, sleepless nights, and constant availability are often worn as proof of ambition. People boast about how busy they are, how little they sleep, how much they sacrifice. Burnout is reframed as commitment, as if depletion is the price of success. This normalization disguises a deeper issue. Burnout is not a milestone, it is a warning signal. It reflects prolonged stress, imbalance, and unmet needs. Yet instead of addressing structural causes, unrealistic workloads, constant connectivity, pressure to overperform, the focus shifts to individual resilience. When burnout is glorified, recovery feels like weakness. Taking time off feels undeserved. Admitting exhaustion feels like incompetence. As a result, many people push beyond their limits, numbing themselves to fatigue until their bodies or minds force them to stop. The crash becomes inevitable. The system benefits from those who overextend themselves. Short-term gains are achieved at the cost of long-term sustainability. But individuals bear the consequences: declining health, strained relationships, diminished creativity. What is celebrated publicly often hides private struggle. Redefining strength requires rejecting the idea that suffering proves worth. Sustainable effort, balanced ambition, and intentional rest are not signs of laziness, they are signs of wisdom. When you refuse to glorify burnout, you challenge a culture that equates exhaustion with value and begin building a path that honors both achievement and well-being. Wealth concentrates while effort disperses. In the system you were born into, effort is widespread but wealth is not. Millions of people wake up early, work long hours, and pour their energy into keeping industries alive, yet the rewards of that collective effort do not distribute evenly. The labor is shared, the ownership is not. The risk is socialized, the profit is centralized. You are taught that hard work guarantees upward mobility, that if you simply outwork everyone else, you will eventually arrive at abundance. But when wealth concentrates at the top, no amount of scattered individual effort can easily penetrate that ceiling. The system channels energy upward. Each worker contributes a small portion of value, and that value accumulates in fewer and fewer hands. This does not mean effort is meaningless. It means effort alone is not the full equation. Ownership, leverage, and access determine scale. Yet these concepts are rarely emphasized in early education or mainstream narratives. Instead, the focus remains on productivity and perseverance, reinforcing the belief that outcomes are purely personal. When you begin to understand the difference between earning and owning, you see why effort often feels exhausting but not transformative. You can work harder every year and still remain in the same position if the structure itself funnels growth elsewhere. Recognizing this pattern shifts your strategy. You stop asking only how to work harder and start asking how value flows. You begin looking for ways to build, invest, collaborate, and create systems of your own rather than solely sustaining someone else's. That shift in awareness is subtle, but it changes everything. Questioning the system is discouraged. Every system depends on a certain level of compliance to survive. If too many people question its foundations, its stability begins to shake. That is why questioning is often subtly discouraged, not through overt censorship alone, but through social conditioning. Those who ask uncomfortable questions are labeled negative, unrealistic, or rebellious. From a young age, you may have been told to follow instructions rather than challenge them. In professional settings, being a team player can sometimes mean suppressing dissent. Even in casual conversation, deeply questioning economic, educational, or cultural norms can make others uncomfortable. Silence maintains comfort. Curiosity disrupts it. The discouragement is rarely dramatic. It is embedded in tone, in raised eyebrows, in advice to be practical. Over time, you internalize these signals. You begin filtering your thoughts before expressing them. You question yourself before you question the structure. The boundaries of acceptable dialogue narrow quietly. Yet progress has always required those willing to question. Social reforms, scientific breakthroughs, artistic revolutions all began with someone challenging what was considered normal. Without questioning, systems stagnate. With questioning, they evolve. But evolution threatens those who benefit most from the current design. Learning to question responsibly but courageously is a skill. It requires emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and resilience. It means examining evidence rather than reacting impulsively. And it means accepting that discomfort is not always a sign of disrespect. Sometimes it is the first step toward growth. Stability is prioritized over fulfillment. Stability is presented as the ultimate goal, a steady income, a predictable routine, a secure future. And stability is important. It provides safety, reduces chaos, and allows long-term planning. But when stability becomes the highest priority, fulfillment often becomes secondary. Many people remain in careers, environments, and lifestyles that feel misaligned because they offer security. The fear of instability outweighs the desire for meaning. Over time, the pursuit of safety can quietly erode passion. You wake up each day knowing what to expect, yet feeling disconnected from what you do. The system reinforces this trade-off. It highlights the risks of stepping away from conventional paths while downplaying the emotional cost of staying. Stability is measurable. Fulfillment is subjective. Because fulfillment cannot be easily quantified, it is often treated as optional. But human beings are not machines designed only for predictability. Creativity, curiosity, and purpose require space. When your life becomes entirely structured around minimizing risk, it can also minimize aliveness. The absence of crisis does not automatically mean the presence of joy. Reevaluating stability does not mean embracing recklessness. It means asking whether your version of safety includes room for growth. True stability should support fulfillment, not replace it. When security becomes a foundation rather than a cage, you begin living more intentionally. The ladder is crowded, but ownership is. You are often encouraged to climb the ladder, to compete for higher titles, better salaries, greater recognition. But what happens when millions are climbing the same ladder? It becomes crowded. The steps narrow. The competition intensifies. And even at the top, you may still be standing on someone else's structure. Climbing implies hierarchy. It implies limited space at the top. For every promotion gained, many are left behind. The system thrives on this upward striving because it fuels productivity and ambition. Yet the ladder itself is owned by a relatively small group. No matter how high you climb, ultimate control may remain elsewhere. Ownership changes the game entirely. When you own a platform, a business, intellectual property, or investments, you are not merely ascending. You are building. Ownership creates leverage. It shifts you from participant to architect. Yet ownership is discussed far less than promotion. The crowding of the ladder creates constant pressure. You measure yourself against peers, wondering if you are moving fast enough. But rarely do you pause to ask whether the ladder is the only structure available. There may be other ways to grow that do not involve squeezing into an already saturated path. When you shift from climbing to creating, your mindset transforms. You stop focusing solely on position and start focusing on design. You begin asking what you can build, what you can initiate, what you can co-own. That shift moves you from chasing limited space to generating new space. You were taught to survive it, not redesign it. Most of your training prepared you to navigate the existing system, not to question or reconstruct it. You learned how to apply for jobs, not how to redesign industries. You learned how to follow laws, not how to influence policy. You learned how to budget within economic constraints, not how those constraints were formed. Survival skills are practical. They help you function. They keep you afloat. But survival is not the same as transformation. When all your energy goes toward maintaining your position, little remains for reimagining the structure itself. You become skilled at adaptation, not innovation. Redesigning requires a different mindset. It requires seeing systems as flexible rather than fixed. It requires understanding incentives, power dynamics, and collective action. These topics are rarely central in mainstream education because redesigning can disrupt established hierarchies. Yet every system that exists today was once designed by someone. Policies were drafted. Institutions were formed. Norms were created. If they were designed, they can be redesigned. That possibility is both empowering and unsettling because it implies responsibility. When you move beyond survival and begin thinking in terms of design, you step into agency. You recognize that while you may not control everything, you can influence something. And collective influence, when aligned, becomes powerful enough to reshape what once felt permanent. If this message challenged the way you see the world, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe for more deep conversations that question the narrative. Comment below with your thoughts. Do you agree, or do you see it differently? Like and share this with someone who needs to hear it.